using this as an opportunity perhaps to practice more fun recipes, that are maybe a little more involved at home, and
Yeah,
keeping that health up, because in these moments of stress, of being home a little more lethargic, it is super easy, almost like a default, that one would just want to snack and binge and, just do all that. But that could perhaps lead to more of a dipped state, than a pleasant state at which one would want to be in. Just like overall speaking, briefly, I was telling a friend recently that I really see this as an opportunity, this whole situation, as an opportunity to personally develop rapidly, because it is in these challenging times that the greatest growth can happen.
true.
So yeah, whether that is being consistent with your intentions for what you set out for, whether that's consistently eating healthily, whether that's committing to a creative process project, really using this time to power up, rather than wither away. And that all begins with the decision to do so. So, yeah.
You mentioned not having a victim mentality.
Yeah.
And what I thought of when you said that was, and that this coronavirus presents us with the option to take that victim mentality or not. Does taking that victim mentality create stress in the body?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because in a victim mentality, essentially, so breaking it down a little bit, it would be as if saying, with total responsibility, I am saying that I am responsible for my response to all that arises within my life. In the victim mentality, it is saying that I have no power to influence the different factors arising within my life. Now, obviously, let's say I don't like Corona. Well, I can't just make Corona go away quickly. What I can do, however, is not feed into the stress, the anxiety all around me. I can educate myself as to not spread misinformation, possibly.
Mm.
Different things like this. This is more taking that proactive, responsible approach, rather than, it's all crazy. So, yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to do that by doing all these video interviews with experts such as yourself in different areas, so that we can
Right.
get some more insight into each one of these different areas and
Mm-hmm.
gain knowledge and hopefully avoid that mental state of stress that's going to result from just not knowing what's going on, or maybe missing an opportunity to improve, like you were saying earlier.
Absolutely. And another key point with this stress, I suspect that the stress arises for many reasons. One primary reason because of the great disruption that it has for everyday life. Whether that is people not being able to go to work or having reduced hours or even unfortunately being laid off. Another component of it is just the uncertainty societally, globally. What's going to happen economically? What are the different social impacts that this is going to have? When am I going to go back to my events, all this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's helped me, at least personally, is just accepting and knowing that nothing is ever guaranteed. And that's why I really like to focus on the big picture and the mindset stuff, because in having this kind of perspective from the start, such a thing happening wouldn't really shake one, who was not taking things for granted, thinking that, oh, everything is the way it is and it always will be. Not necessarily. And this is teaching everybody on the planet simultaneously, very clearly. So I believe that really diving into one's mindset is key at this time, and understanding and just reflecting, that perhaps there were some ways that I was viewing the world that were not so advantageous.
Right,
And now
right.
I have the opportunity, to change those perspectives, perceptions. I believe that throughout this whole situation, this coronavirus, there are deep lessons for everybody on the planet to learn
Mm.
at any stage of life. In any situation in life, there are, very foundational, just epic lessons.
Yeah,
Really.
I agree. What do you think about this? I've heard this in the past. I tend to believe this as well, that people say that uh, people may view it as a bad thing. Like, I don't think anyone views this coronavirus as overall a good thing. I think it's something that we wish we could avoid. So
Yeah,
they say that the lesson keeps presenting itself until you learn the lesson, right? And
yeah.
we've had these pandemics before. I guess we're not learning fast enough. We're not learning enough. It keeps
Mm.
repeating itself. Is that similar to what you were saying?
I think that's definitely a part of it. And I think a part of that too is, you know, being able to take a little step back, or zoom out, if you will, that, the possible impacts that this is having in other places on the planet. I'm sure you and many people viewing have seen those images of emissions over China, and how they've been reduced. I'm sure wildlife is having the time of its life, due to just like less human activity,
True.
perhaps the cessation of deforestation in different parts of the world, things like this. So, not only seeing those things, but then also on the flip side, this specifically the society that we live in here in the US, and for the most part in most places throughout the world, is very, um, to use a term, a yang, so yin and yang.
Right.
Yang is more so the action oriented, the external heat, masculine. So the society is more so like this,
Right.
productive, get with it, work. Um, so this situation is super yin because it is
Mm.
slowing us down tremendously. It is inviting us to stay at home, to look within, to reconnect. So I believe that this also has a tremendous balancing effect for the collective to really learn that lesson, that it's not all about the external, not all about, you know, seeing our value based on what we can produce and how we contribute to this whole society, but,
Mm.
reconnecting to our own intrinsic value, and to ourselves, learning how to be whole without external stimulus and validation. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I hope that people are taking the time to learn this, and I do appreciate your insight. I think the biggest thing, like before we had this conversation in my mind, was that you would be able to help people with the stress. I think that's what it is, because the stress, as I think I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we know that affects the immune system in
Yeah.
a negative way. So if you can use some of the techniques you've discussed, they all sound like opportunities to me. All right. I know that most
Absolutely.
people would view them as negatively. So knee-jerk reaction would be, this is bad, this is bad. But if we view them as opportunities, I think the stress is really, you please comment on this. Stress, everyone has stress. I mean, there are some things you can remove yourself from so that you're not part of, and that reduces the stress. But I think most stress is just in how you handle it mentally, right?
Yeah.
How you process it. So what you're giving is, I think, some good techniques on how to process these things so that it doesn't result in the stress within your body, which is going to hurt your immune system.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of a very key point that I wish to make as well,
Mhm.
is, inviting everybody listening to reflect back on life, to different times in which there was a challenge of some sort and the situation was not yet resolved. So we were in the middle of things, and reflecting on the story about the situation that we were telling ourselves, just like our own mental narrative and projection of the situation, and then perhaps seeing how the situation resolved itself and probably ended up to be a little better than we anticipated, expected, you know? So like when one can reflect and see, at least in my own experience, the countless times, in which I've worked myself up and freaked myself out,
All right.
and in different times sent myself into a psychosis.
Yeah.
and and then at the end of it, yeah, it was all good. It was my imagination just running rampant. As I like to say, creating fantasies of fear. So I think that's really, really key, because tying back to the news and to our perspective is that objectively there is a situation happening. Subjectively, news sources, other emotionally charged people might be seeding in their opinion that is only amplifying our fear and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then with a mind that might be a little less trained, to rebalance into the reality of the present,
Yeah.
then we're just running rampant with these stories and
Right.
projecting it to be as if it is the finale for humanity. you
Right.
know
Right. Well, so that's what I'm seeing too. Is that I believe. Please comment on this too. That balance is what is the goal, and then depression is more like you're living in the past. Anxiety is you're living in the future of things that haven't happened and probably never will happen. And I think that's where we are right now as a society. Right? Is we're in that anxiety state where we're imagining things that may or may not happen, and we can't bring ourselves into balance, and that's affecting our stress level, which is going to affect the health of our immune system at a time when we need our immune system. So this is more important than ever.
Yes, absolutely. And with that, I want to add a little practical technique tip. The name eludes me right now, but we'll refer to it as the 5-4-3-2-1.
Okay.
And what this is to, as you're saying, remove ourselves from the anxiety of the future, removing ourselves from the depression of the past, and slipping into the present to a greater degree. So with the 5-4-3-2-1, it is engaging all of our senses so that we can anchor back to the now moment, the present, the only thing that really exists. So 5 is to look at 5 different bits of stimulus in your environment. So right now I'm outside. So I might say, the sky, this little palm frond, this tree in front of me, these twigs below me, and these leaves at my feet. 4 would be to hear 4 different distinct sounds. So these cars in the distance, this rustling in the trees, the sound of these little birds chirping, and the plane up above in the distance. 3 would be to touch 3 different textures. So perhaps again, this palm frond, these pants, and these bristling leaves below me. 2 would be to smell 2 different scents. So perhaps I can sniff the dirt and then my pants, or whatever the case is, a flower. And 1 is to taste something. And I usually like to say, if like food or something isn't available, just like the inside of an arm or something.
Your own arm, though, especially today, not someone
Yeah,
else's.
yeah. But if you've been coughing, sneezing into your arm, maybe not.
Oh, maybe not, yeah.
No, but so yeah, techniques like this, and essentially what different contemplative practices are doing is really bringing you back to the present. Because you touched on a very foundational, very important point that is truly, again, like I said, foundational to this kind of thinking, is that we become anxious when we're stepping into the future because it is uncertain, because we don't know, because there are countless variables that we cannot account for. And most of it is just projecting, what we've lived in the past, or inserting our fears into the mix, or we're in the past depressed, ruminating on how things could have been different, or things that we've done wrong, or whatever the case is.
Mhm.
But in the present, is where our power lies, where we can be at peace. And I think another very important piece of this whole process, is seeing life as a process, and seeing that it is a cycle, of death and creation, destruction, rebirth. For example, a little seed, when it begins to germinate, the walls of the seed are being destroyed. It might think, the little seed, that its life is coming to an end. It awakes into the darkness, only to sprout out into the light, growing, eventually bearing fruit with seeds, and then that fruit falling, the flesh of the fruit decaying away to seed back into the earth once again. The sun going up, the sun going down, the tide going out, the tide coming back in. So looking at this situation really as just a part of that whole process, right now it might be more on that destruction side, and and that's often the side that people don't really like. It could be
Correct.
the little more unpleasant side of things, but knowing that a rebound is assured,
Mhm.
and that, again, this is the roller coaster of life. And when we fear a part of that process, when we reject a step in the whole sequence, is when we slip into fear,
Mhm.
you know
Okay.
so
Well,
yeah.
well, I know we're just about out of time, but that's a great
That's
point
it.
to finish up on. Is to try to remain in the present moment, and very much thank you for your insight. And I'm sure that we will have some more conversations in the near future, because this is
Yeah.
very important right now for the collective humanity to understand. And again, thank you,
Indeed,
Ziza,
indeed.
and we will see you again soon.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, everybody watching. Have a nice one.